I remember the taste of the beer, not because it was good, but because it was the last thing that tasted normal before my world imploded. We were sitting in the back room of a downtown bar, me, my best man, a few cousins, the usual pre-wedding crowd. Everyone was in high spirits, talking about the honeymoon, making jokes about married life, ribbing me like I was on death row. I laughed, too, maybe even louder than the rest, because for all the nerves and pressure, I was certain I had picked the right woman. That certainty lasted right up until my phone buzzed. No contact name. Just a number. I remember thinking it was a vendor or maybe the photographer. Then I saw the message. One sentence, wrapped in quiet doom. She's not who you think she is. At first, I stared at it, confused. Thought maybe it was a prank. Then I saw the file attached, a video. No caption. No explanation. Just a timestamp, the night before. Her bachelorette party. I slipped away from the crowd without saying a word. Found a quiet hallway behind the bar and hit play. The video wasn't grainy. It wasn't a blurry mess from across the room. It was clear, close, and damning. There she was, Brittany, dressed to the nines, wearing that tight silver dress I'd complimented just a few hours earlier on FaceTime. She was standing in the middle of a hotel room, surrounded by cheers, music pumping in the background. Then he walked in. Not a stripper. Not a joke. A regular guy in a black t-shirt and jeans. She looked surprised at first, then something shifted. Her smile. It wasn't the nervous, playful kind I'd seen before. It was familiar. Too familiar. She stepped toward him. He said something I couldn't hear. She bit her lip, tilted her head, touched his arm. And then she kissed him. Not a drunken, clumsy accident. Not a peck. A real kiss. The kind you lean into. The kind that means something. She whispered something into his ear. He picked her up. Carried her straight into the next room. The door shut. The screen went black. I watched it again. Then again. My hands trembled, but I couldn't stop myself. I was watching the woman I was supposed to marry get swept away by someone else, like a scene from a nightmare I didn't know I had. And then the second message came. From the same number. This time with a name. That wasn't a random guy. That's her ex. She invited him. Samantha. Brittany's oldest friend. The one she used to be inseparable with. The one she didn't even include in her bridesmaids group chat. I remembered Brittany calling her dramatic a few months ago when she quietly dropped out of the planning. I never asked why. I trusted Brittany. I sat on a bench in that hallway for what felt like hours. My ears were ringing. Not from the music, but from whatever storm had just detonated in my head. The party kept going in the next room. Someone called my name a few times. I didn't answer. When I finally walked out, I didn't go back in. I didn't say goodbye. I didn't explain. I got in my car and drove to my apartment in silence, the video playing on a loop in my head. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. It was worse than that. It was numb. Like I was watching my life through a window, and someone else had taken my place. The tuxedo I was supposed to wear the next day hung on the closet door, still in its plastic. The ring sat in its box on the nightstand, glinting under the soft light. For the first time, it looked like a joke. A ridiculous little promise I'd believed too hard in. I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. I just sat there, staring at the ring like it was ticking. Tick. 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 Each second felt like a countdown to a wedding that wasn't going to happen. At least, not in the way anyone expected. Because something in me had broken, quietly, cleanly. The kind of break you don't feel at first. You just know something's not working the way it used to. I didn't know what I was going to do in the morning. I just knew I couldn't stand there and pretend anymore. Not after what I saw. Not after what she did. And not when everyone around me still thought she was an angel in a white dress. The night before my wedding wasn't the start of a fairy tale. It was the autopsy of a lie. Morning came, but it felt like waking up inside a burning house. Everything was normal. That's what made it unbearable. Downstairs, the smell of bacon and coffee filled the kitchen. His mom moved around like it was just any other joyful day. Her smile was soft and proud. She didn't know she was cooking breakfast for a man who'd already buried the wedding. His best man barged in an hour later, talking a mile a minute about tuxes, flower girls, and the groomsmen who had apparently stayed up too late drinking. Justin nodded where he needed to, smiled just enough to keep suspicion low. Every word felt like noise in a world that had suddenly gone quiet. He showered, dressed, and packed the one thing that mattered into his inside pocket, a small, black USB drive. It didn't look like much. But it held the truth. A digital blade, ready to slice through the ceremony like a scalpel. On the label, printed neatly, for the families who thought this was real. He didn't feel nervous. He felt clinical. The kind of cold calm that comes after a car crash. When your body stops reacting and just processes. His heart should have been racing. Instead, it barely beat. Across town, Brittany was already posting photos. Her dress on a hanger. Her makeup halfway done. Her caption said something about feeling blessed, how she couldn't wait to marry her best friend. Each post was like acid on his chest. Not because she was happy, but because she was so good at pretending. The ceremony was set in a rustic vineyard chapel. The weather was perfect. The guests were early. Cameras clicked. Laughter filled the air. Everything about it was painfully beautiful. He arrived just before the ceremony started. The whispers were about how handsome he looked, how lucky Brittany was, how much she deserved a man like him. None of them had any idea they were watching a countdown. The groomsmen lined up. The music swelled. Brittany was behind the doors, just a silhouette at first. Then she stepped into view, glowing in a white lace gown, her face radiant. And smiling. Smiling like she had earned this. Like the night before had never happened. Like she wasn't a walking contradiction wrapped in tulle. Everyone stood, the pastor beaming. People sniffled quietly into tissues. Cameras rose to capture the moment. Justin just stood there, silent. Watching her float down the aisle, bouquet in hand, steps perfectly measured. To everyone else, it was a love story unfolding. To him, it was a stage performance for a crowd that didn't know it was being lied to. She reached the altar. Looked up at him with eyes full of practiced emotion. There wasn't even a flicker of guilt in her gaze. She thought she'd gotten away with it. The pastor welcomed everyone. Talked about love, commitment, and truth. Justin barely heard the words. His fingers brushed the USB in his pocket, feeling the shape of the decision he was about to make. Then came the moment for vows. Everyone turned toward him. Cameras aimed. The world held its breath. He didn't speak right away. Just reached into his jacket, pulled out the small black drive, and looked over at the tech guy standing by the projector. The man was confused for a moment, but took it. Slid it into the laptop. The projector flickered. The music stopped. And the screen behind them came to life. The first frame, Brittany at her bachelorette party. The room changed in an instant. Laughter dissolved into murmurs. Heads turned. Eyes widened. Justin didn't move. Didn't blink. He watched the scene unfold for a fourth time, but now in a room filled with witnesses. Brittany, drunk on something other than champagne, laughing with her bridesmaids. Then the man walked into the room, her ex. The look on her face was unmistakable. Not shock. Not discomfort. Recognition. She leaned in. Smiled. Pulled him close. The kiss was long. Deep. Intimate. Not the mistake of someone overwhelmed. The choice of someone who knew exactly what she wanted. The room fell into a horrified silence as the two disappeared into the hotel room. The video cut to black. A collective exhale filled the chapel, like the sound of air escaping a balloon. All eyes turned toward Brittany. Her face had changed. Gone was the glow. The charm. In its place, confusion. Panic. Realization. People began to shift uncomfortably in their seats. A woman in the third row covered her mouth. Brittany's mother looked like she'd been punched. Her father stared at the screen like it was a hallucination. Brittany tried to speak, to say something, anything. Her mouth moved, but no sound came out. Justin turned to face the crowd. Not to explain. Not to apologize. Just to make sure they saw what he saw. He wasn't here for revenge. He wasn't here for drama. He was here for the truth. And now, it was finally out. He walked down the aisle alone, past rows of shocked guests and frozen expressions. Past friends who didn't know what to say and family members who suddenly understood. Outside, the sunlight felt fake. The birds were still chirping. Somewhere, the wind rustled through the vines. The world was still beautiful. And completely different. Behind him, someone called his name. He didn't stop. Didn't look back. He'd given her everything, time, love, faith. She gave him a lie in a wedding dress. And now, the dress was stained, not with wine or dirt, but with the truth. The kind no dry cleaner could ever fix. The silence that followed the kiss was unbearable. Thick. Unnatural. It was the kind of silence that didn't ask questions. It answered them. The screen faded to black, but the room didn't come back to life. The only sound was the slight hum of the projector, like a machine trying to fill the void left by the destruction it had just broadcast. Then the gasps began. Small ones at first. Staggered. Disbelieving. The sort of sound people make when their brain refuses to connect what their eyes just witnessed. A man in the back muttered something under his breath. Someone else coughed sharply, as if choking on a reaction they hadn't meant to have. A child asked a question too loudly and was hushed in a panic. All the while, Justin stood at the altar, hands clasped in front of him like a man at a graveside. He didn't look at the crowd. He didn't look at her. His eyes stayed forward, locked on the stained glass window above the pastor's podium. It was a window depicting an angel holding a sword. Funny. Behind him, Brittany's breathing quickened. It started as a gasp. Then a whisper. Then panic. Her voice sliced through the room like a knife, frantic, desperate, begging someone, anyone, to shut it off. But it was already over. The damage was done. Her father sprang from his seat like a bullet. The man moved faster than anyone expected for his age, charging toward the AV table with fury and disbelief etched across his face. He didn't make it far. The tech stood frozen, too stunned to stop him. Brittany's mother collapsed into the pew, hand over her mouth, sobbing into trembling fingers. The sound of her heartbreak cracked through the sanctuary like thunder. The guests didn't know where to look. Some turned away, embarrassed for her. Others stared openly, morbid curiosity anchoring them in place. Cell phones hung limp in stunned hands. No one had prepared for this. No one expected the bride to become the headline of her own funeral. And in a way, that's what it was. Not a wedding. A burial. Justin stood motionless, his face a mask carved from stillness. No anger. No satisfaction. Just a deep, exhausting clarity. She tried to move. Tried to speak. Her mouth worked furiously to form words, explanations, justifications, maybe denials, but her voice couldn't reach anyone. It bounced uselessly off the high wooden beams. She reached for the mic, lunging like it would save her. Justin didn't flinch. He simply stepped away. Not with drama. Not with flair. With the calmness of someone who had already let go. She was too late. The mic slipped from her hand as someone pulled her back, one of the bridesmaids, maybe her sister. Someone who no longer wanted to be associated with the scene unraveling at the altar. The pastor stood frozen, clutching his Bible with both hands like a lifeline. Even he, a man who had probably married hundreds of couples, had never seen a ceremony turn into a public execution. The screen went black again. The room didn't recover. And then Justin turned. No speech. No parting words. Just movement. Measured. Intentional. He walked past the rows of shocked faces. Past Brittany's relatives, who looked at him not with anger, but with a strange kind of remorse, like they knew this wasn't his failure. He passed her college friends who had laughed so loudly at the rehearsal dinner. They didn't laugh now. Some couldn't even meet his eyes. He passed Samantha, seated at the edge of a pew, her phone clutched tight in her hand. Her eyes met his for a half second. She didn't smile. She didn't blink. Just nodded once, slow and solemn. Then he pushed open the chapel doors and walked out into the daylight. It was sunny. Warm. The kind of day photographers pray for. Behind him, the chaos continued. Voices rising. Shoes clacking across tile. Brittany screaming his name now, no longer angry, just afraid. He didn't stop. Didn't slow. Just kept walking. One foot in front of the other, as though every step peeled off the last 6 months of lies and illusions. Outside, the vines stretched across the hills in perfect rows. Guests spilled from the building, unsure whether to chase him or stay and watch the wreckage. Someone called out, his name carried faintly on the breeze. He ignored it. The name felt foreign now. He walked until the music, if anyone even remembered to turn it off, was just a ghost in the wind. What started as a wedding had ended as something else entirely. Not revenge. Not closure. Just truth. In its most brutal form. And truth doesn't apologize. It doesn't wait for timing. It doesn't soften its blows. It just arrives. Uninvited. Unwelcome. Unforgettable. And on this perfect day, surrounded by flowers, wine barrels, and white linens, it had finally arrived. The aftermath was messier than the explosion. For the first 2 days, Justin's phone didn't stop. Texts, calls, voicemails. Some were from family, gentle, cautious voices trying to check on him without digging too deep. Others came from mutual friends, unsure which side to believe, carefully crafted messages that asked for the story without seeming to ask. Brittany reached out, too. A flood of desperate apologies, walls of text that tried to rewrite the truth in real time. Screenshots. Promises. Threats. Please. He didn't read most of them. He didn't need to. The only message he opened was the one that came 3 days after the wedding that wasn't. It was from Samantha. She said she wanted to talk. He met her in a park just outside the city. No makeup, hair tied up, sitting on a bench with a look that wasn't victory or satisfaction. It was something else. What she told him rewrote the entire narrative. Samantha hadn't reached out to save him. She hadn't come forward because she cared about his future. She'd done it because Brittany had stolen something from her, too. The man in the video, the one Brittany had kissed, held, disappeared into a room with, wasn't just some wild fling or ex-lover she drunkenly invited for a laugh. He was Samantha's boyfriend. Or at least, he had been. Until Brittany got bored of playing bride and decided she needed one more secret to wear like perfume. Samantha had found out weeks before the wedding. Caught them together by accident at a bar she wasn't even supposed to be at. She didn't confront them. She didn't scream. She waited. And then she picked up the shattered pieces of her own heart, packaged them into a flash drive, and passed them along to Justin like a poison gift. Not to save him, but to bury her. Samantha confessed all of it, her voice hard, distant. She told him he had been the delivery system. The clean, polished, innocent groom. The matchstick. He hadn't exposed a betrayal. He had played the lead role in someone else's punishment plan. It hit harder than anything Brittany had done. Because he'd thought, for one moment, that someone had been on his side. That someone saw him drowning and offered a hand. But even that hand had strings attached. The realization hollowed him out. He didn't say anything when she walked away. Didn't stop her. Didn't blame her. Maybe she had a right to be angry. Maybe Brittany deserved everything she got. But Justin deserved more than to be a pawn in a war he didn't know he was part of. That night, he shut everything down. Deleted every wedding photo still floating online. Deactivated his social media accounts. Pulled the SIM card from his phone and tossed it into the trash. He left his apartment key with his best man, packed a bag, and vanished. No destination. Just distance. He drove until the city lights faded into country roads, until the highway felt endless and the radio static replaced every voice that had filled his head for days. It wasn't just heartbreak anymore. It was disillusionment. He began to question everything, every smile Brittany had ever given him, every reassurance, every shared secret that now felt scripted. But worse than that, he began to doubt himself. How had he not seen it? How had he been so thoroughly fooled, not just by one woman, but two? He thought about the way Brittany had leaned into the lie. The way Samantha had pulled him into hers. Two sides of the same manipulation. He thought about love, and how it looked different now. Twisted. Unrecognizable. The world didn't feel safe anymore. Not in a dramatic, cinematic way, just in the quiet realization that trust wasn't a foundation. It was a gamble. And he had lost. Twice. He stayed off the grid. No texts. No calls. No explanations. Not even his best man knew where he had gone. He rented cheap rooms under fake names. Paid in cash. Ate in silence. He watched people, strangers at diners, families in gas stations, couples walking hand in hand, and wondered how many of them were just like him. Smiling on the surface. Rotting underneath. What haunted him the most wasn't the betrayal. It was the ease of it. How seamlessly Brittany had smiled in photos while planning her own destruction. How effortlessly Samantha had weaponized his pain to get her revenge. He thought back to the USB, the weight of it in his pocket, the certainty he'd felt in those final moments at the altar. He had believed he was doing something righteous. Noble. But now he understood, it had never been about righteousness. It was about exposure. And in the end, he'd been exposed, too. Not as a hero. Not as a victim. But as someone who had been played, twice, on the grandest stage of his life. And the worst part was, no one even saw it. Because all they remembered was the bride, the video, and the silence. They didn't see the second betrayal. The one that didn't get projected on a screen. The one that happened in a quiet park, between two people who had nothing left to believe in. Justin didn't know what came next. He just knew it wouldn't include the past. Time didn't heal anything, it just gave space for the wreckage to settle. Justin didn't return to his apartment for weeks. When he finally did, it felt like stepping into a museum dedicated to a man who no longer existed. The suit he never wore still hung in the corner. The Mr. and Mrs. mugs were untouched in the cabinet. There was dust on the ring box, like the universe had done him the courtesy of sealing it away. He didn't unpack everything. Just enough to live. Enough to breathe. Enough to stop running. One morning, when the world outside was quiet enough for his own thoughts to be louder, he sat down and wrote a letter. Not to Brittany. She had already received everything she needed, the silence, the distance, and the shame of an audience she couldn't escape. This one was to himself. Not for who he was when it all collapsed, but for the version of himself that would come after. The letter wasn't poetic. It wasn't dramatic. It was honest. Brutally so. He wrote about the lies. About the illusion of love that had wrapped around his life like a perfect snow globe, until someone shook it hard enough to crack the glass. He wrote about the pain, the betrayal, the anger. But also the relief. Because somewhere beneath the bitterness and broken pieces, there was peace. A kind he hadn't expected. He realized he hadn't just avoided a bad marriage, he had escaped a performance that would have lasted years. Maybe decades. So he boxed up the ring. Tucked the USB drive next to it. Wrote one final note and sealed it inside the package. No return address. Just her name. Let her open it. Let her remember. Let her keep the proof of what she'd destroyed. He mailed it the next day and didn't think about it again. Months passed. The chaos quieted. People stopped whispering. His absence turned into a story, then a memory. Eventually, life became life again. He started over, but not from scratch. From clarity. He worked when he wanted. Slept when he needed. Read books without checking his phone. Walked aimlessly just to hear the gravel crunch under his shoes. There was no schedule, no ring to polish, no future to rush into. The past found its own way back to him. Brittany tried to resurface, through vague messages, through mutual acquaintances dropping hints. He learned she had tried to make things work with the man from the video. The one she risked everything for. But karma didn't miss. Turned out, that man had been engaged to someone else the whole time. A completely separate circle of betrayal. She was just one of many secrets he'd tucked away, and when his own fiancée found out, the fallout hit them both. Brittany's second chance had been built on sand. It collapsed faster than the first. The stories got around. Small-town tongues moved faster than facts. What she did wasn't just remembered, it became her name tag. She didn't wear bride anymore. She wore the one who got exposed. Meanwhile, Justin lived in a quiet part of town. The kind of neighborhood where no one asked too many questions, where people nodded at you without prying. And then, by accident or design, he ran into Kayla. Not Samantha, the Avenger in disguise. Kayla. Another bridesmaid. A quieter one. A kind face he'd barely noticed in the blur of pre-wedding madness. It started with a simple hello in the coffee shop. She recognized him first. He remembered her later. The coffee turned into conversation. The conversation turned into dinner. There was no rush. No spark forced into flame. Just honesty. Simplicity. Realness. He told her everything. The betrayal. The collapse. The aftermath. She didn't flinch. She didn't romanticize it either. She just listened. When she spoke, she didn't try to fix it. She just shared pieces of her own wreckage. Stories that weren't designed to compete, only to connect. They weren't saving each other. Just learning how to exist next to someone who didn't wear a mask. And maybe that was enough. Brittany's name never came up again. Not between them. Not in public. But Justin still heard things. She'd moved out of state for a while. Tried to start fresh. Came back a few months later. Rumor was, she couldn't shake the shadow of what she did. Couldn't outgrow the version of herself that had been played on screen. People remembered. Not because they were cruel. But because the truth, once revealed, has a way of echoing longer than any vow. Justin didn't revel in it. He just knew better now. He knew the signs. He knew the red flags he once painted white. And more than anything, he knew himself, what he wanted, what he deserved, and what he would never accept again. His dignity hadn't survived by chance. It had been fought for. In silence. In solitude. In the middle of wreckage that didn't come with applause. And in the end, he didn't need revenge. He just needed the truth to land in the right hands. It had. And now, he was building something better. Not with a perfect woman. Not with promises wrapped in lace. But with someone honest. Someone real. And this time, the ring could wait. Because peace wasn't found in vows. It was found in walking away from the people who made lying look easy.